Welcome, everyone, admins from far and wide. We're so pleased that you've come to join us this morning. This session is called Auditing Your Operations. It's designed to help you evaluate your organization objectively. The criteria we're going to be using today is based on a website called the Operations Report Card by Tom Limoncelli and Peter Grace. It covers 7 operational areas with 32 items in total. The site has strong ties back to Tom's book, Time Management for System Administrators. Keep in mind that these sources are sysadmin focused. They aren't necessarily user focused, so you're going to improve your own department here, and in doing so, free up your time to better serve the people that you support. As they say, you do want to secure your own oxygen mask before you try to help others. So now please take into account, again, that both Tom and Peter have a lengthy background as system administrators, and as such, a lot of these are written from that point of view. So we'd now like to introduce your speakers for today. My name is Dennis Wurster. I am the Associate Director of Computing Services at the Edmonds School of Music in Rochester, New York. It's about 3.5 hours north of here, up on Lake Ontario. I've been there for about 5 years, and a little bit about Eastman. Eastman School of Music is the world-class leader in music education, spanning 9 decades of producing award-winning graduates. That's right, GAP. Boasting Guggenheim Fellows, Grammy, and ASCAP award winners on its distinguished faculty.
My name is Nate Felton. I am a senior PC systems administrator for the endpoint engineering team at RIT, the Rochester Institute of Technology, also in Rochester, New York. I will be celebrating my 10 years at RIT this fall. Our team deals primarily with OS and software deployments to about 4,000 endpoints, but only about 10% of those are Macs.
You might remember us from our previous talks, Mac Administration, the Fundamentals in 2014.
Deploy Studio up and running in 60 minutes in 2013, as well as a few other Deploy Studio related sessions over the past 7 years.
And this same talk last year.
And the year before.
Yes, if you were here last year, welcome back.
It's become a bit of a tradition of mine to include an updated picture of my daughter in my slides, so that when she sees this someday on YouTube, she can be embarrassed that her dad shared a picture of her in front of a bunch of strangers at a conference, and is now forever on the internet. Just remember, Daddy loves you, and stop dating the weird guy you're seeing.
So we usually like to try and qualify the audience here and better understand where you guys come from as well. So we'll do a quick show of hands. How many of you are in enterprise support or engineering? Okay, some. How about in K-12? All right, a few others. Higher ed? Okay, that is where the meaty part of the curve is on that. How many are doing independent consulting or work for an MSP, that kind of thing? Okay, cool. You're welcome here too. It's cool. How many of you have been admins for less than a year? Okay. How about 1 to 3 years? 3 to 5? Okay, all right. And how about more than 5? Okay, so a lot of higher ed people who've been doing this for a while. All right, last question. For how many of you is this your first MacAdmins conference this year?
Nice.
Okay, a fair amount of you. That's great. That's great. We always like to put this presentation in front of the new folks. How many have been here for 2 to 5? Okay, and more than 5? Who are the people who've been here all those times? All right, we have a broad spread today. This is fantastic. We're going to hit a lot of good stuff.
So this is a top-down look at operations. There is no magic here. You have to ask yourself the questions and write down the answers. Commit to it. Doing this in your head is not a real audit of your operations. Take those pens you got from the vendors, or from Dennis, and put them to paper. When you get back from this conference, discuss what you've learned with your team back home.
Yes, if you need a pen, raise your hand. We'll make sure you get one.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll pass them back to you. So your goal here is to figure out, what are you, David Letterman? What are you doing?
She wanted a pen.
Your goal here is to find the gaps that you might have in your department and to help fill those. And once you recognize what they are, then you can work towards filling them. So every organization does have blind spots, I guarantee it. And even though we've never met you individually, we are here to help you identify what those might be. And this session is full of suggestions, not commands. So we're hoping to have you identify where those gaps might be. Many effective departments, according to Tom Limoncelli and Peter Grace, use these kinds of things. These are the things that they saw as they visited various departments. And the more of these you use, the more successful you are probably likely to be. It's also okay to acknowledge that some of these may not apply to your department, and that's okay. So these are practices that are based on the idea of good fundamental IT hygiene, you could call it. If you've got these, it's great. If you don't have these, people notice. Ignoring these things causes a cascading effect. Ignoring one can lead to even more that are not happening the way they should. So it's based on the idea that if you have a water leak, it's metaphor, if you have a water leak, you want to stop the water from coming out of the pipe before you go grab your mop. You have to figure out what to fix and fix it before you clean up.
We're assuming that you're not one of these two guys at the top. You're probably one of the two at the bottom. We'll assume that as a MacAdmin, you are comfortable with terms like automation, production versus testing, backups, patching, and networking. As an interesting exercise, try letting your boss run through this audit on their own, and then compare your notes. We may be surprised how much you agree on, or at least agree on some of the areas of opportunity for improvement.
So today we're going to help you conduct that self-assessment. We've passed out some papers. For those of you on YouTube, what's up, YouTube? We have passed out some papers so that people can answer yes or no to all of these things. You can do this at home too. We're going to have you don't have to share your results with anyone. You don't have to share your results with us. So there are lots of experts here who can help you fill in the gaps that you find. We're going to take questions via the Google Slides Q&A feature, which I will go turn on like this. That's going to... Hang on. We'll figure this out.
Here.
Start now.
Yeah. And then that's got to go back over.
You know, I got to start coming to rehearsal. And then we slide this back over here.
No, leave it there.
That one stays here. This one goes to the other side, right?
Yep. Other way.
So it's one of those you got to go right
Behind
to
the
get left.
scenes. Yes.
Then you go back like this.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Then like that, and like this. Poof.
Nothing happened.
It's at the top of the screen. There's a URL at the top. You can fire up a web browser, go to that URL, type in a question or a comment that you have. You can also see the things that other people have submitted. And if you say, ooh, that is a good question, you can give it a thumbs up, and it will float up to the top. We'll stop at a few different points through this presentation to take a look at questions and comments. So we're going to start with the public-facing policies.
All right. The goal of an IT department is to deliver service that is effective, timely, and professional. Users calling your help desk with issues want one thing, an answer. They want it quickly, pleasantly, and in the least amount of effort on their part. One of the best ways to do this is to make sure that your environment does not become interrupt-driven. How many times have users stopped by to ask for that quick question? 20 minutes later, you've been completely distracted, you've lost focus on what you were working on before. This takes away from things that are already committed to and makes you appear more unreliable to your management. If we're not careful, we end up always fixing the squeaky wheels and never have time to prevent them from squeaking in the first place. So let's talk about the public-facing policies. Public-facing policy, or practice, number 1, are user requests tracked in a ticketing system. This one seems obvious, yet a lot of us don't do it. The main reason to use one is everyone wins. Raise your hand if you are not using a ticketing system today. Oh,
Right.
We got 1, 2,
Okay.
well, we got a wave. Okay. So, honestly, more of you are than I would have expected.
That's great.
Yes, good. Humans can't remember as well as computers. Expecting sysadmins to remember all user requests is the direct route to dropping those requests. Keeping requests in a ticketing system improves sharing among your team. Sysadmins are less likely to duplicate work and can divide the work among your team members. This enables better time management. It allows for less interruptions if users can submit their own requests and also view the status of their tickets. Management wins too. Stalled requests become visible, and it also reveals your most frequent problems or your most frequent users.
Public-facing practice number 2 are the 3 empowering policies defined and published.
The 3 empowering policies? What are those?
I'm so glad you asked, Nate. So here's a quick sidebar. There are 3 public-facing policies that you must define and publish if a sysadmin team is going to get any work done at all. First, you have to define the ways that you're going to allow people to ask for help. Ideally, these are all methods that should funnel into your ticketing system. So if you have a phone number that you publish, you want to make sure that inbound calls get routed by somebody who answers the phone into your ticketing system. If your team is busy and people are getting a recording, you want a audio file of that recording to get sent to your ticketing system as an attachment. If you can transcribe it, even better. But at a minimum, you want to make sure you capture it. At a minimum, you want to be able to capture the date and the time that a request was made, so that when people say later on, hey, I called you guys, but it took forever to get an answer. Well, we can say, well, you called us at 4:55 on Thursday, and it's 10 a.m. on Friday. I still think we're within our SLA for that. Sysadmins need to be empowered to redirect users to follow the policy, so that when people find you in the hallway and say, oh, hey, while I've got you here, I want to talk to you about this trouble I've been having. You want to be able to say, listen, I'm on my way to a meeting. If you send me an email or go to the URL to fill out a ticket, we'll make sure to get onto that. We'll make sure that we get it prioritized properly, whatever properly might mean, depending upon the request. And if you don't define the ways people can ask for help, you're, again, going to have people respond to the latest and loudest issues. They're going to pick and choose what to work on. They're going to take either the easy stuff or the stuff that gets them away from people bothering them. And your team's going to get overwhelmed. Empowering policy number 2, the definition of what constitutes an emergency. You need to define what this is so that you can handle the true emergencies. This keeps everyone on the same page and the same definition. Nobody has to guess what to work on. So if you don't have a definition of this yet, you might consider 2 different classes or 3 different classes. One would be what I call the work stoppage, the code red. And the code red is different depending upon what industry you're in. I'm in the education industry, so for us a code red would be things that stop education from happening, or things that stop money from flowing into our organization. For businesses, things that stop money from flowing in, that's a code red too. Things that keep payroll, making sure that happens, that would be a code red. And what it is in your world may be different than that. Then I think about what's a code yellow. So a code yellow is anything that, if that continues long enough, will eventually result in a code red situation. And then everything else after that is considered a fairly routine request. This is one of those things where the lack of planning on your part does not necessarily constitute an emergency on our part. So that's empowering policy 2, figuring out what is an emergency. And empowering policy number 3, figuring out the scope of service. You have to be ready to answer lots of questions. For instance, who are the people that we actually support? Define it. If you're K-12, do you support students? Do you support faculty? Do you support staff? Do you support the C-level suite at your organization? Do you support the spouses of the C-level suite? I see some nodding. But get that in writing. Say, hey, you are entitled to support. It's part of our policy. Are people allowed to get support after business hours? Are they allowed to call you? Do they have your cell phone number? Can they call you on a weekend? When you do the work, are you doing it at their desks? Do you have to plan to be able to drive to their house to solve problems they're having at their house? Depending upon your industry and your company, this may or may not be normal. It may be part of the culture or it may not. And then what items are you going to work on? What hardware and software is supported? If somebody comes to you with a Mac Mini running Snow Leopard, are you required to support that? If they come to you with if you're in education, for instance, and they come to you with a milk crate full of item X, this new item, and put it on your desk and say, here, we use these now, because they just got a grant and they decided to go and spend that money and show up with a bunch of stuff. Do you get to say, okay, or do you get to say, whoa, hang on, we have a process for this, we have to get vetted, we have to consider it from many, many different angles before we approve this. How do we do this? So defining what you work on, where you work on it, and who you work for is very important. And this slide has a word on it that most people who come to this conference aren't quite clear on how to pronounce, so I'll help you all out. It's this one right here in the quotes. It says no. So what we like to do every year is ask people to help us practice this so that you can feel empowered to use it back at your organization. So all together we will say,
no.
Very good.
Good job.
So the other thing is to make sure that all of these empowering policies are public. You want to put them right on your door, make sure that you have management buy-in, because when people rebel against these things, and it will probably happen, you want to be able to point to it and say, this is the policy that not only do I follow, but it's something that was blessed by my boss and my boss's boss. If you have a question about this, their phone number is here, and their desk is over there.
So, public-facing practice number 3. Does a team record monthly metrics? You need to be data-driven when you make decisions or need help in swaying upper levels of management. The best way to develop your metrics is to create one metric per sentence of your clause or charter. For example, you may have a charter for a PC deployment team that might be to provide a high-end, standardized computer to each employee starting their first day, refreshed on a 3-year cycle at industry-leading operational costs.
And it should be locally sourced. And
Locally sourced and
responsibly grown.
Yep.
Get all the buzzwords in there.
No GMOs.
No GMOs. and renewable, that would be good.
The metrics for this might be time since the standard hardware configuration was updated, the cost of that current hardware configuration, number of employees onboarded this month, what is the turnaround time to deploy that hardware to a new employee. You could also consider metrics that are things for the current age of your fleet. You can put this into things like buckets so that it's easier to group things that are of concern. For example, if you have a 3-year return or a 3-year cycle, then you can put things into a bucket that are older than 3 years. This makes it easier for management to see the things that are outside of your policy so that you can get better support in replacing those machines that have gotten out of what you've already agreed on before. If you don't have a charter, talk with your manager about writing one. Alternatively, here are some simple metrics that you could adopt today. How many users do we support? How many machines do we manage? How many open tickets are in our ticketing system right now? How many new tickets were created since last month? Who or what department opened the most tickets this month? And how much internet bandwidth was consumed last month, and what services consumed the internet bandwidth? How many people have seen spikes for the World Cup lately? Okay.
Okay, I'm seeing nodding heads there too.
We need to have a discussion with management. This gives you a historical reference rather than a single point in time. This helps show a trend and helps you predict needs for your future growth. It gives you more ammo to ask for the things you need to do your job.
Right. When people ask you, how many machines do you support, you don't want to have to say, a lot. You want some actual numbers to go with that.
Let's talk about playing nice with each other.
Modern team practice number 1, do you have a policy and procedure wiki? This is a place where you document your policies and your procedures. And the difference between a policy and a policy is a decision that you make in advance. It's what should be done. A procedure is how do you do that thing that should be done. So I tend to take a very event-driven approach to this, and if you saw my talk on documentation, you'll remember that I had a whole giant list of events there. So here are a few of those. What do you do when a new employee starts? What do you do when an employee leaves your organization? What do you do when an employee is terminated, if it was a non-amicable parting? What do you do when new hardware arrives, or when machines are decommissioned? How do you add somebody to various services like file sharing or VPN? How do you do things like maintain your server, changing disks in the RAID? And if you needed to, how do you change the root password on all of your servers? And these tend to fall into 3 categories. So there's things that you want to be consistent about because your brain doesn't always do as well with details over time. There are the things you do infrequently and don't want to have to spend time relearning because people forget things over time. And there are also the things you do when you're panicking and you don't want to have to think on your feet. You want that off-board brain, that documentation to help you out. For us, there are certain procedures that we only do once per school year, or maybe once a semester, and that is just long enough to completely forget all the details or the order of the things that have to happen. And sometimes that order is kind of a set of nested dependencies, where you have to do one thing before you can even do the second one. And if you don't remember that, it makes life tougher. Tom Limoncelli uses the term wiki here, but it could refer to any type of published documentation system. Okay, modern team practice number 2. Do you have a password safe? So password safe is a place where your passwords live that is not in your documentation itself. It's its own entity. So it's important to keep your passwords safe, but in a modern team environment, we all work on the same systems, and the idea is that you should not use a spreadsheet. You should not use a text file, even if they're password protected. And what you want is a secure database that has contextual data about the things it's keeping track of. Things like LastPass, things like 1Password for Teams, those are all good ideas. If people have other suggestions, make sure to put a comment in. Use the URL at the top of the screen. So these systems also often contain change history, so you can verify and document any updates and figure out how recently passwords have been changed. That can be helpful too.
Modern team practice number 3 is your team's code kept in a source control system. Revision history is key here. Now you might say, but we're not developers. Scripts can be source controlled too. A common example of this would be auto package recipes, monkey repositories, first boot scripts that you use,plists. A lot of common ones are Apple ARD configurations. How many people have lost scripts in ARD because they reimaged their machine and forgot to take ARD with them?
Okay,
Yep.
It happens.
So source control is a great example of a way to back that up. It helps keep an audit trail. It allows you to easily revert any breaking changes that you were made to a script. It allows you to share and contribute with others too. There's been a great number of projects that have been talked about this week. A lot of them are shared on either GitHub or GitLab. A lot of people still write wikis, or blogs, not that often, but helps you to contribute out to the community. Take note of all the open source projects. Neither of us are developers, but we both use Git, or at least trying to get better at using Git.
Trying to get better.
Yeah, trying to get better. One thing I can share is I've been trying to do a little bit more with GitLab's continual integration. So when you push a commit up to GitLab, I have a little runner running on some servers that help distribute whatever that change was, whatever that configuration file that I changed out to the servers that need that configuration file. So now instead of me making one change and having to SMB into a couple of different servers to copy that out, I hit commit once in Git and it just kind of does it for me. So it helps with automation and allows it to be consistent across your fleet.
Modern team practice number 4. Does your team use a bug tracking system for their own code? And again, I will say that neither of us are, well, I'm definitely not as much of a developer as Nate is.
I just pretend to be one.
But you want to be able to keep track of the defects that you find in your code and to prioritize those defects so that they can be addressed. But if we didn't have a bug tracking system, which we technically don't where I work, we could start using our ticketing system to keep track of these things. If you're using GitLab or GitHub, there is a built-in feature to help track bugs and keep track of those. So yeah, those are great ways to get that done. Modern team practice number 5, does stability have a higher priority than new features? Again, in your development area, you want to try and keep your projects as stable as you can and not introduce more bugs. You want to introduce features once you've got a stable release. You kind of go back and forth between stable and feature releases. These things are not terribly long or complex that we tend to write, but the bugs we find are generally typo related. But if you have significant complexity in the things you're making, then keeping track of the bugs and prioritizing stability can be very helpful.
Modern team practice number 6. Does your team write design docs? Design docs can go by many names. I use something called a site book. Some consultants might call this their statement of work or their work plan. They describe the current state, the desired state, and what the system should look like in the end. For example, documenting the auto package and monkey workflow, or the policy for adding a new employee to your organization. You can create a template that is used for each line of business application you support, and have that documentation include vendor information, licensing details, installation notes, your support agreements, or even download instructions. And that applies to auto package because auto package isn't always 100%. You may still have to go and get the download manually.
Okay.
Modern team practice number 7. Do you have a postmortem process? When something goes badly, that never happens, right?
Oh, we're perfect.
Well, exactly. Document it so that when it happens again, or document it so that when or if it happens again, you remember what you did to fix it the last time. Hopefully you can prevent it from happening again, but in case it does happen again, you can repair it faster this time because you've already documented what you did the last time.
Cool. All right, and that brings us up to our first Q&A session. We're going to do 3 of these. So we're going to go hit our audience tools here and take a look at our questions. Oh, got a lot of questions. Okay. All right, first question. Do emails count as a ticketing system? I will tell you that when I joined Eastman, we did not have a ticketing system. There were 3 of us that were in charge of supporting the several hundred people who work at Eastman, and we were handling it via a shared inbox for help at ESM. And that was insanity. And one of the first things that I put into place was getting a ticketing system in place. So I would say emails do not really count as a ticketing system because you don't have a good way to track who's working on what. You do have the ability to sort of pass requests from tech to tech, but you also don't have a good sense of when things were completed as well. You don't get to do any metrics or measurement when it's just emails in an inbox.
The follow-up I have to that is anytime an end user emails me directly and not into my ticketing system, I have a little macro in Outlook that allows me to forward that email into the ticketing system for them. And that way I can still track it through the ticketing system and get the metrics and things like that. And better yet, once it goes into the ticketing system shoots them another email to kind of let them know it's in the ticketing system. It's kind of like a subtle, like, this is where you should have put it the first time.
Right. Emails don't allow you to prioritize well either. So I would say my answer is no. Email does not count as a ticketing system. All right, got another one?
I'm not quite sure what this one means.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, somebody wanted to, they agree with me.
Okay.
All right.
Some people use KeyPass for the password vault. I know
Okay,
that
good comment.
we use that. Another one that's kind of more enterprise friendly is one called Thycotic. Anyone using Thycotic as well?
Oh.
Oh, we got, oh, hi. Oh, you don't count.
They work at the same place.
Yes.
Okay, somebody says they use Keeper.
Thycotic.
So TH.
Yes.
Okay,
Thycotic.
your lisp wasn't coming back.
Oh. Another comment. Password protected Excel is silly.
Okay, yes, don't use password protected Excel. That can be broken into.
What was the GitLab feature that I mentioned at one point? So there's something called continuous integration.
I think that's the
CI.
industry term, CI.
Yes. GitLab has the concept of a GitLab runner. Essentially, it's a little daemon that you run on a remote system, or it can be the same system. But effectively, you can create, I want to say workflows. I think they have a different name. But effectively, you can create workflows that, say, when a Git commit hits a repository, it kicks off a script that you have, and you can tell it which runners to run that script on. So to give you an example, the one I use the most is we have a scripts repository that is read-only to all admins. So no admin can go into the script repository remotely and modify a script without it being source controlled. The only thing that has read-write access to that scripts share is the service account that the GitLab runner is running as. So it basically forces people on my team to use source-controlled scripts. And that way, when I double-click it while I'm, working on something, I'm not, if a colleague of mine on the team is modifying the script, I'm not trying to run something they're debugging right that moment. So.
Yeah, I was just going to say the general version of that is actually all your production stuff. Source it from your source code control system rather than from some copy on a disk somewhere, because then that forces. We all think, oh no,
Right.
I'll always check my stuff in, but that's the way to enforce it.
Yep.
Sure. Yeah. Make sure you're, what's that phrase? Eating your own dog food?
Yes.
All right.
Nice.
It's not as easy to throw those when you're sitting down. All right, another question. Let's see if I can get it like this.
There you go.
Where do you log or save your postmortem? So a postmortem is usually a meeting that you have with your team, either when things go really, really well and you want to record that. I'm sure they'll do a postmortem after MacAdmins for the team that drive that event. but also where things go badly. So where do you save or log these? I think the result of that meeting is going to be a consensus about what didn't go as well and how are we going to fix that. And I think that the place where you log or save that will be in the documentation that you have, either in the ops doc for a particular service or in the procedure documentation you have for a particular procedure. That would be where I would expect to put them.
I'm a little more lucky in the sense that we actually have a team called Service Operations, and they do root cause analysis anytime a SEV1 or a SEV2 happens, so that we can understand what caused the issue, and they take care of all the documentation as far as what was done to resolve it and restore service and things like that. So I have a small team that helps me with that, but
Right.
not everyone gets that.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. If not, oh wait.
No, that was a test one.
Okay. All right. We are ready to jump into the operational practices. So operational practice number 1, does each service that you provide have an operations document or an ops doc? So what's a service? What do we mean by that? Anything that you present to a end user or a customer is a service. For instance, your help desk is a service. Networking is a service. Things like DHCP, DNS, Radius, anything that runs on your network, and if it wasn't running, it's going to light up your phone. One of my teammates is back here, and he will tell you that I say constantly, our goal at Eastman is to keep the phones as quiet as possible. That's how you know you're doing a good job.
No music interruptions.
So if you've got an ops doc, the services that you have, could you rebuild them if you had to? And what about 6 months from now? And if you don't document a good way to do that, not only do you have to reinvent that process, but you also repeat all the same mistakes that your brain said, oh yeah, I'll probably just do it like this, and then bad flashing happens and smoke, and it's a bad time. So what if you're under pressure? If your memory does not work as well at 3 a.m. when you've been paged and called in to work on an issue. And then when you write these things, you also have to make sure that other people can do them as well, because you deserve a vacation. You deserve to go out to dinner with your spouse. If you deserve to come to MacAdmins, right? And you can't complain about being overworked if you haven't built a way to share that load with the rest of your team. And when you've got new people that join that team, they should either learn how to watch these things by watching you do them, or you can give them an ops doc and they can try it on their own. If they can learn on their own and only bother you when they get stuck, it saves you time and makes you look less like the gray-beard admin who knows how to do everything but doesn't share that information with anybody else. And your management will like this too, because then they can finally promote you into doing something that you'd rather be doing. Finally, with your operations documents, you need to put an expiration date on them. You need to put a review date on them, because the way we do things and the things that we use as tools change all the time, and you need your documentation to be as fresh as the tools that you're using.
At RIT, we use a knowledge management tool called Right Answers, and it has the option, I believe by default, that when you create a new article, it automatically tags you as the author and adds a expiration date of 1 year from the day that you created that article. And 1 year later, and I actually ironically got a few while I was at this conference, it keeps sending you emails every morning until you go to that article and basically tell it that you reviewed that the information is still correct. And I know personally sometimes that's what I need, is a little bit of nagging to like make sure that I do this stuff.
There's not like a snooze button?
No, there's no snooze button. It's not like remind me in 10 days. It's every morning until you go and review that documentation.
Tapping you on the shoulder, hey.
Yeah, and it takes a little self-control. So, I mean, there's no snooze button, but, you know, you could just click the link and say, yep, it's the same, and kind of move on. But it's nice little reminder to actually review your documentation. Operational practice number 2. Does each service have appropriate monitoring? The monitoring should be based on your SLA from your ops document. No SLA? That's fine. You just need a simple up or down alerting at the minimum. An easy way to get started with this is a service called Uptime Robot. This tool can help you check a website if it's available. You can ping individual hosts. You can check for specific ports being open and available. Or you can even monitor web pages for keywords to be available or changed. If it detects any changes, it can email you an alert. I didn't look into this, but there's also a paid version that I think can actually text you as well. More advanced monitoring tools can alert you if things like your certificates are expiring on your website, or if the whois information on your domain registration has changed and you didn't make that change. And we can talk about thresholds for monitoring here in a little bit.
Operational practice number 3, do you have an on-call rotation schedule? So if you have more than one person in your team, how do you make sure that you know who's set to receive the calls during either downtime or during time when you're not at work? And this serves a few different people. It serves you, it serves your customers, it serves management, it serves HR as well. It serves you because it lets you plan for a life outside of work. So if you've got that dentist appointment, or again, you have that event like MacAdmins that you want to come to, you can plan for that. It improves the service to customers because they will still have just one number to call, and it's automatically routed to the person who is available to take that call. It serves management because it gives them confidence that somebody, no matter what, is going to be available, that a phone is not just going to ring and ring and ring. And it also serves HR because they're aware of how labor hours are being allocated. So if you think you don't have an on-call rotation schedule, then the answer is yes, you do. It's just 24/7 by 365. But that doesn't mean you can answer yes for this question. So there are a couple of tools that we've picked up in previous years, Ops Genie and PagerDuty. Those are probably the two that people talk about the most for this type of thing. I'm seeing some nodding heads on that. So operational practice number 4, do you have separate environments for development, for QA, and for production? This is one of those things that's going to sound kind of obvious. A lot of these things sound kind of obvious, but it's okay to hear obvious things once in a while and to evaluate them. We want our systems to be reliable, and the way we preserve that reliability and stability is by segmenting these environments. Introducing things that are untested into your production environments puts that reliability at risk. And if you decide to take that risk, it might work today, but you won't stay lucky forever, and you have an anomaly in your setup that you have to mentally remember or document somewhere else.
One of my favorite tweets or quotes, I'm not really sure where it originated from at this point, but everybody has a testing environment. Some people are just lucky enough to have a totally separate environment to run production in.
So here's where you remember that SLA, that service level agreement that you have. You're committed to a particular uptime or availability, and having separate environments ensures that your essential services are running and not compromised. Developers, you do not get to run on production equipment. You can make your own sandbox, you can set it up, do your testing there. And these separations should be clearly defined in that op stock that we talked about earlier.
Operational practice number 5. Do mass rollouts have a canary process? Many years ago, coal miners would bring a canary in a cage, and when the environment became too toxic, the canary would expire before the humans did. You want that early warning sign to happen before you deploy a change to all of your users. Deploy to one machine first, maybe your own desktop, then deploy to some more machines, maybe your coworkers, and then deploy to many machines, and continue deploying to larger and larger groups until done. Any single failure means that you can stop the upgrade, roll back the change, and continue when the problem has been fixed. You start with one machine, then some, then many. Example of this is Monkey has catalogs for this purpose. Most of you may recognize Monkey automatically dumps into the testing catalog first to help kind of guide you along that best practice of test first and then promote to production later. This allows you to push updates to a few machines before you expand the rollout to more of them. At RIT, we've been trying to develop this concept of, well, there's a new term I learned this week, basically beta testers, so that we kind of test to our team first, then we roll it out to central IT, and then after central IT, we might roll out to some of our what we call distributed colleges. So we have central IT members in certain colleges, and then we have colleges that have their own IT administration. So basically, we try to roll out to people in ITS that we are close with first, and then we roll out to the broad spectrum after that. So it allows us to do more staggered updates and hit different use cases as the updates get rolled out.
Cool. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about automation practices.
At sysadmins, we automate for many reasons. It saves time and money. It produces consistent results every single time. It turns a burdened task into an unburdened task. Burden tasks are the ones that require your time and attention while they complete. The unburdened ones are the ones you can run unattended after you start them, and they will be fine until you check on them later. Let's look at how we evaluate our automation practices. Automation practice number 1. Do you use configuration management tools? If you walk out into the vendor gallery outside, there's quite a few booths talking about this week: Adigy, Fleetsmith, Jamf. These tools allow you to define configurations around your policies and procedures and then deploy them to systems en masse. They can also check for any deviations from these configurations and remediate those systems, so that any systems that aren't compliant.
Right. Automation practice number 2. Do automated administration tasks run under role accounts? Who knows what I mean by role accounts? Quick show of hands. Okay, some of
Service
you.
accounts.
All right, so often we set up automated procedures that run at predetermined times. For example, you might have a script that not only backs up a database, but it restores it somewhere else, and then it also validates that restoration to make sure that things work properly. And at some sites, those types of scripts run under the credentials of an actual user, somebody who is on your team, something that they set up that they wanted to get done with. It was 4:30 on a Friday, and this was the last thing they needed to do for the week. And good sites run these scripts under some role account. And for example, a role account is one that exists specifically to accomplish a particular task. It's not a real person, it's just a user account that you use for that task. So if departmental staff changes, if Larry, who you've loved and has been part of your team for years, says, you know what, I'm off to go do something else, and Larry's no longer here, you have the ability to manage these things, to handle the notification that run under that account. For example, for doing backups, you might have an actual user that's named backup. And this is one of those areas where you can, if you see a lot of this, you might notice that the sysadmin is lazy in some other things as well. So document the users, their associated services in the ops doc, and you can make that happen. For instance, FileMaker Server runs under a specific user when you install it. That's one of the things that we deal with at Eastman. Automation practice number 3. Do automated processes only email you when they have something to say? Notifications are great. We really like getting them, and it's good to have systems that have built-in notifications when important things happen. However, if you have things that are noisy, if you have the, anybody remember in Simpsons they had inventions, and one of the inventions was the everything's okay alarm? And the alarm would continuously go off if everything was okay. The problem with noisy monitors like that is that they lead to what's called threat fatigue. You don't have a sense of what the truly important things are if you're constantly being bombarded by notifications. So the rules here are kind of simple. If it needs human action right now, send a text message to the on-call phone. If it needs action sometime in the next 24 hours or so, open a ticket in the ticketing system, have those tickets automatically jump to the appropriate priority. If it's just informational, hey, here's something that happened, log it to a file. And if nothing is happening, you really shouldn't write anything anywhere.
Fleet management practices. Let's see if we can find who has the largest fleet in the room. How many people are managing 10,000 machines? Oh, we got one.
Okay, 2. All right.
All right, all right.
Do I hear 11,000?
Oh, 15, 20, 50, 25.
No? No?
So 18,000, okay.
Okay. That is a lot of machines. How big is your team to do that?
There's 4 of us that do the application and deployment and imaging.
4 people. Impressive. Are you hiring?
We have many other teams involved.
Okay.
A lot of, like,
Other teams are involved.
We're specialized for hospital/academic research. So
Wow, that's fantastic.
IBM has 6 for 140,000 max.
Okay, IBM has 6 for 140,000 max. I'm just repeating what I'm hearing from the audience for the recording.
So they tell me.
That's right.
We met with Fletcher Brevin a couple weeks ago. That's what he said.
Okay.
Take it for what it's worth.
The person who's working in the medical field, what do you, yeah, all right. Can you catch things? Everybody, oh great. Hang on to your coffee, watch your laptops. Nice job. Well done. That was great. So what tools are you using to manage that many machines?
most of them are Windows machines.
Okay.
And we have about 2,500 Macs.
Right, okay.
So we're using a combination of SCCM. We also have thin clients, so WDM. Jamf Pro,
Okay.
and AirWatch for iOS devices and Android
Cool.
mobile devices.
So, out of the 18,000, does that include iOS devices?
That's probably in addition.
Oh, okay.
Really?
So that's just our clients that we have in basically SCCM. So these
Okay.
are, which has all of Mac's PCs.
I always like to ask
I
that.
believe right, Nick, you had you had your hand up, yeah.
So we're with Google, my
Okay.
coworker and I, and we have a fleet of 100,000,
Okay.
managed by something like 15 individuals.
Wow. And I bet a lot of those are sort of distributed and remote workers too, and
Yep.
all of that. That's
And-
great. And all right, if you can tell us, what tools are you using to help manage those people?
Well, we depend on Monkey and Puppet an awful lot.
Okay.
We have some open source tools that I know, I'm sure a bunch of you have already heard of.
Sure.
Santa, for example.
Yes.
Are you still using Simian?
Yep.
Yes? Okay.
Yep, Simian as well.
For the time being.
Yep. Yeah, we have all sorts of internal tools for imaging as well.
Cool.
Relying on MDM as well.
Yep, and we're making the MDM transition at the moment.
Nice.
All right. Good to hear.
Like launching an MDM.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you for your contributions to the community, because I know I've used a ton of your documentation and tools myself, so.
That's great. All right, here it comes. Coming back. Look out.
Okay.
All right. Yes. The fleet management number 1. Is there a database of all your machines? You should know what machines you have. Again, we're saying obvious stuff today, but that's okay. You should know what OS are those machines running? How old are they? Whose desks do they sit on? Who have they been assigned to? Are they out for repair? Do they still have maintenance associated with them? Do they have a warranty left? How big is the disk on them? How much RAM do they have? You want to be able to keep track of all those things. And it's not just machines, it's also your mobile devices, it's also copiers and printers. And there are lots of great tools out there that can do this pretty much for free. If you're a Monkey user, look into using Monkey Report. You can get really nice graphs and listings that way that are pretty fast to search. If you are a mixed shop and have to support Windows stuff too, look into a tool called Spiceworks, which you can spin up pretty quickly and that can give you lots of great reporting. There are also other tools that I think you wanted to mention.
It's something we're looking into for asset inventory in general is an open source tool called Snipe It. It's something we're potentially looking to implement soon. Kind of behind the scenes, we're looking at a new ITSM tool in general at RIT, at least for central IT, and we're hoping that might have asset management come along for the ride. Personally, as far as Monkey Report's considered, I attended a lot of sessions this week on OS Query and also one on Fleet. So when I get back, I'm going to be looking into using OS Query with Fleet and with Graylog or an Elk Stack or something like that to potentially replace Monkey Report or augment Monkey Report, so that you kind of get. One of the big things with that is it's kind of automated information. You don't have to keep track of it yourself. The stuff tells you what's going on.
Nice.
So one of my favorite things in Monkey Report is the GSX integration, so that you can easily kind of know what stuff is still under warranty just by looking it up real quick without having to go out to GSX
Right.
separately.
Jump makes that extra hop. Cool. All right, fleet management practice number 2. Is your OS installation automated? If you've been here this week, you may have heard about a thing or two regarding OS installation. So why do we automate our OS installation? Well, it creates a uniform installation on a piece of equipment. It removes inconsistencies that you may have between different people who might be doing this on your team and between different events or loads that you have on a particular machine. We have a suggestion. The suggestion is if you are going to take in a machine from somebody who's leaving your organization, before you redeploy it, go ahead and wipe it clean and reinstall that OS. I would say re-image, but as we all know, imaging is dead.
Right.
Right. So we want the equipment to be in a known good state and a supportable state. And I'll talk a little bit more about why that's important soon.
Fleet management number 3. Can you automatically patch software across your entire fleet? Or do you have to visit machines one at a time? Or do you have to visit machines one at a time but don't actually have time to visit machines one at a time? Because that's a poor use of your time. Another reason I automate things is not so much to save time, but to also ensure consistency across my fleet. Updates should happen frequently and silently without any interaction or as little interaction from the end user themselves.
Yep. Fleet management practice number 4. Do you have a system refresh policy? So this is how often do you hand out new equipment to people? If you don't have a system refresh policy, here's what's going to happen. Something bad is going to happen to a machine, and it won't be your choice about when the refresh happens. It will happen at a time that the machine picks to misbehave. And that's not exactly what we want, not a great way to be in charge of your time as much as you might like. So if you don't have a refresh policy, you might do a 3-year policy. So that means every year you're going to literally be replacing 1/3 of your fleet. And that means every quarter, you're going to be replacing 9% of your fleet. So take your fleet, figure out what 9% is. That's your goal for the next quarter. CFOs really like it when you plan like this because it becomes a predictable expenditure. And they can even pick when in the quarter that expenditure hits the books. That's something that they like. They like to be able to plan for that. If 3 years is too often for you, if that's too much money, or if you don't have the staff to turn around that many machines that quickly, if you do a 4-year cycle, the math works out slightly differently. You're replacing a quarter of your machines annually. It's about 6% every quarter. And that means you're replacing 1% every 10 days. So figure out what 1% is, and that's the next 2 weeks of your work to do. So we're up to Q&A roundup number 2. Check and see if we've got some new ones here.
How does an ops doc differ from normal troubleshooting documentation?
So an ops doc is, here's how things are defined to work. Here's how you set them up. Here's how they integrate with other things. Troubleshooting documentation could be similar, I suppose, but I don't think it's exactly the same thing. You might use an ops doc to help you perform troubleshooting. But I guess I don't have a fantastic answer for this. If anybody has ideas,
To me,
make sure to throw a catch box your way if you have ideas.
To me, an ops doc is more what it defines
Pass
what
that
it
back.
should be and how it should be running, not necessarily how to fix it when it breaks. But I guess you
Yeah.
could add that in there.
Yeah, it's more like, what is that? The theory of operation, I think, is the industry term for that.
I'd say troubleshooting would be more a knowledge base, knowledge-based system
Yeah.
that you can look up when you have a particular
Branching and
issue.
conditionals and
Yeah.
things like that. Okay. Very good. Other questions?
That was a test one. I was just trying to get it out of my queue. Monitoring note, status cake is great. Also Spiceworks Netmon and itmanager.net.
Cool. Well, I'm glad we've got them on the screen. I will be sure to watch this video and check those out.
I got a +1 for Snipe It. If you're willing to pay for hosting, you can buy it as a service for not a ton of money.
Okay.
One thing I will say about Snipe It is I think it was version 4, they released a REST API that I was looking forward to so I could integrate it with some other things.
All right. The next one here. We're transitioning to a new asset management system, but for now we write asset info to Snipe IT. Or, I'm sorry, Snipe It?
I believe it's
Okay.
pronounced Snipe It, yeah.
Using a cleanup script that runs during the imaging process. Okay, so during the imaging process, stuff automatically dumps itself into the management system. That's clever.
Yeah.
What would you say if part of your IT team refuses to participate in an on-call, even though they have the most problems and call into the help desk most often? Their manager states they may quit if they have to be on call, even though the rest of the organization was mandated to be part of it at hire.
Like it might be all right if they all quit. You gotta review.
This is not well. This is not a technical issue. This is a management issue, and their manager is in charge of these kinds of things. So, what I would do is I tend to take a very honest and open approach to this. I say, here's what's happening. Here's who's doing it. Here's the results that are coming because of that. Is that acceptable? And if the manager says yes, that's acceptable to us, then there's your answer. Okay, in organizations where machines aren't purchased by IT, like research labs, but IT is obviously expected to support and maintain them, how can IT enforce a refresh policy?
You can't. Yeah.
Again, I think that's more of a management and operations discussion? Okay, we'll see if we can grab the next one. Other people are jumping in, and this has become a discussion now. I like that, because that way I don't have to have all the answers up here on camera. We'll try and track that down.
Yeah, I don't see another question on here, I'm sorry. I mean, I see another one, but I don't see it as related.
Okay, so is it Dan? Okay,
Okay.
we'll throw that up here.
There we go.
I would like to implement a procedure that requires the customer to either agree to replace the device at the end of the warranty, or agree that when they run a device past warranty, device failure will not result in a high priority ticket for my team. I think that is a logical and reasonable expectation.
We have something similar. We basically call it best effort, that once it gets outside of its warranty period, we say best effort, which is basically our golden ticket to say, we don't have time for this right now, it's out of support. It's actually an official policy for us. We have it out on our website that basically says after such and such a date and so forth that we recommend machines come with a 5-year warranty, and if they expire, when that warranty expires, they become best effort, and like I said, we can tell them it's not under warranty, we don't have to touch it.
Right.
Do you want to mic up?
Okay, watch out. Oh, water bottle down. And it's okay.
I missed the coffee cup, I'll take it.
It had a lid on it. That's fantastic.
So our contract actually states that we actually get to charge you hourly if you let your machine expire out of warranty, because you're essentially shifting your company's problems onto us as your support firm.
Right. Yeah. Well, getting those expectations in front of people in advance and letting them make the decision, making an informed decision, is always more useful than having people show up and ask for lots of help as a surprise.
What were the two products for on-call rotation?
Pager duty and we'll roll back. Pager duty, Ops Genie.
Ops Genie,
Okay.
yeah. Okay.
All right. Any other questions?
No, that's the end of the questions.
All right, cool. Now
So-
we move on to the third half of our presentation, the disaster preparation practices.
Bad stuff happens to good people, but it's all about how you handle it. Let's talk about it. Disaster prep number
Number one, yeah, we both advanced.
Oh, I'm
Go
sorry.
for it. Disaster prep number 1, can your servers keep operating even when you have a hardware failure? So if you've got a server that has RAID, then you have an array of disks that can all work together and help out when one of them dies, because equipment does eventually die. And you can replace that failed disk, and the users are none the wiser. Many servers also have multiple network interface cards so that you can have redundancy in that way as well. Multiple power supplies, so that if the power goes out, you may even have separate power circuits that machines are plugged into. If you don't have the budget for some of this stuff, but you still want to have the ability to have your stuff keep operating during a failure, you could virtualize it and host it somewhere with better redundancy. It may be easier to pay rent on a co-located virtualization service than it is to try and run and babysit this stuff yourself. And if you have no budget at all, well, next to no budget, you could at a minimum schedule some type of clone from your production services to an offsite or auxiliary drive to keep things up and running. If you happen to still be using Macs for servers, you could use Thunderbolt adapters to get multiple network interface cards at a minimum to provide that redundant networking you want. But Mac Mini Server falls down on a bunch of these, so keep that in mind. I think there used to be a concept where you could take multiple minis together, boot one into target mode, and then clone to it periodically.
redundant array of independent servers or something like that.
And then when the primary goes down, you just disconnect the cable, move the network jacks over, and reboot it. I suppose you could try that. I haven't done it, but I always thought it was kind of clever.
I'm sure I have a couple extra Mac Minis that aren't in use anymore. Disaster prep number 2 is the network core N+1. If you are responsible for your network, does it have resiliency? Is the network core N+1? Nodes connect to a wall jacks connect to edge switches, and those edge switches are trunked to core routers. Make the core redundant, make sure there are multiple paths on your network, and multiple paths to your outside world. RIT has multiple fiber paths to multiple providers. When one provider is having issues or needs to perform maintenance, users never know the difference. It just fails over to the other one. This can be expensive, but is still less expensive than actual downtime.
It's true. Disaster prep practice number 3. Are your backups automated? You need backups for about 4 reasons. There's the oops, I deleted the file reason. There's the oops, the hardware died reason. There's the oops, the building burned down reason. That's why you have to have that offsite backup. And the sometimes why of this is archival. Sometimes you just simply don't have as much space in your primary storage as you need, and you need to move things to auxiliary storage. Ideally, you'd copy that to multiple locations. So love is never having to say, did I back up that file? You want to know for certain that you did. I belong to a Mac user group, and the Mac user group is, surprise, surprise, a bunch of white guys over 40. But many of them are married, and many of them have children, and what I tell them is only back up the pictures you want to keep. That if you want to stay married, make sure you've got a plan for this data. We just don't have the photo negatives that we used to have to get more prints made. And backups are cheap and easy these days. There are lots of providers who can help you that will keep these things automated. And if you are in an area where security of your data is important, you can have those backups happen on your site. If it's important for you to have offsite backups for whatever reason, there are lots of tools that will let you push those backups to other services as well. Disaster prep practice number 4, are your disaster recovery plans tested periodically? It turns out nobody, even though backups are important, nobody really cares about backups per se. They care about the restorations that are possible once you do backups. That means that on a regular basis, you should be going to your backups, picking up half a dozen files, restoring them, and testing to make sure that they are what they intend to be. Or if you've got a server snapshot, restore that server snapshot to new hardware or to a VM and test that it is what it ought to be as well.
Disaster prep number 5. Do machines in your data center have remote access? Can you get to them remotely and power cycle them if you need to? Maybe you have a cool KVM that offers network access. Maybe you have a PDU that allows for power management of individual ports. That's always my favorite is I can't get it to reboot with a command, so I just kill the power to it and turn the power back on to that port it's plugged into. How many of you have a video feed to your data center so you can tell if it's on fire?
Hey, look, the smoke.
It's gray on the bottom.
It doesn't usually do that.
HP has ILO. Dells have iDRAC. They're best-in-class tools for managing a system without needing to physically be on site. I got a little bit of a laughter about best-in-class.
So our last section is an audit of your security practices. And this is by no means an exhaustive security audit. It's meant for you to just kind of evaluate the culture of security in your organization. In a pinch, I suppose you could count Gatekeeper as a self-updating, silent anti-malware tool, if you had to. But it would also be fair and reasonable to start considering other endpoint solutions as well. Ideally, you want something that updates itself and that you want to be able to control how often that happens. And ideally, you also want all of your endpoints to report back to a dashboard of, hey, here's what happened on this machine lately, so that you can look for trends as well. You want to be able to see those real-time statistics about the state of the software on a given endpoint. There are lots of great solutions out there on the market right now that are cross-platform as well. Where we work, we were using Sophos, and recently the university decided to move to Cylance as one of the next generation products.
We also just moved off of McAfee over to SentinelOne, and it's definitely a bit faster.
Yeah. All right, security practice number 2.
Do you have a written security policy? Consider user data. Consider sensitive environments like your finance and administration department, maybe your health department, or fundraising and donor management departments. These departments probably have separate requirements, and they probably have sensitive data. If you handle any credit cards, then there are requirements to be PCI compliant. These policies should be reviewed at least annually by any parties directly involved or impacted by those policies. Even if you're not required to by regulations, you should still consider including relevant security policies in your employee handbook and make them available internally for quick review. SANS or Clover Security have some nice templates. I suggest you start with those. It is critical to have a written security policy before you implement it. That way, when something goes wrong and they ask why, you can say that's why.
Right, and getting buy-in from all the parties involved is important as well. They may come to you with vendor-suggested security practices,
or products.
or you may be subject to regulations, like you mentioned.
Security practice number 3, do you submit to periodic security audits? This goes right along with the annual review of your policies. It's a good idea to bang on the doors and make sure the hinges are still there. Even if this means using a predefined process that you agreed upon internally and update regularly, there's nothing that says you can't do this yourself, unless, of course, there's a regulation saying that you can't do this yourself. In that case, establish a close relationship with an external vendor that you trust. In our case, our payment processor offers a set of specific tests that get performed monthly, and a very nice report gets emailed to us at the end. Security practice number 4, can a user's account be disabled on all systems in 1 hour or less? In the event that a user leaves your organization, can you quickly remove their access? More importantly, can you do that for a fellow sysadmin? It may be uncomfortable to think about having to disable a peer's account on short notice, but prudent security practices are there for a reason. As a sysadmin, we hold the keys and a significant amount of power within an organization. Having a practice to revoke our access after we leave not only protects the organization, but it protects ourselves. If there's an event after you exit, you cannot be blamed because you no longer have those privileges. Security practice number 5, can you change all privileged root or local admin passwords within 1 hour? If you can't, you need to create a checklist of everywhere it must be changed in your documentation. Change the password globally by following the list and adding to the list as you encounter devices that you didn't have documented before. For obscure or ancient systems that it's a little difficult to change those passwords, document the exact commands or process to change the password. I know for me, we have some arcane or ancient alarm panels that take quite a few steps to get in and change just the local code to disarm. As always, automate everything you can.
So those are the primary items that Tom had in his list. But I think this list has other uses as well. If you go to interview at somewhere, you might bring this list along with you, kind of keep it off to the side, and talk to the team about these kinds of things. Ask them how they handle their documentation. Do they have operations documents? It's something that can be very valuable and will help you learn about the culture of the organization even before you spend your first day there. If you're going to hire somebody, if you're the person doing the interviewing, this can be helpful too. You can find out if candidates have experience in certain workplaces that follow these. I've recently been through the interviewing process, trying to find new talent, and when it comes to Mac-specific talent, it's been difficult where we are to find people who are ready to work for a higher ed institution and who have the appropriate Mac talent. So I went to a recruiter, and the challenge was the recruiter was sending back people. When I said back in those days, I need somebody who has experience with things like Casper, they said, okay, great. And I got an email back, okay, we think these people have lots of experience in Ghost. And I said, well, hang on. there's a difference, and we worked together, but I eventually got them on the right page, and I did it by saying, look, when it comes to people that you think would be awesome for us, before you send me the resume, before you call me to tell me how awesome they are, before you tell them to show up at my door, ask them 3 questions. Here are the 3 questions. Have you ever installed software? If you haven't installed software, I'm sure you're very wonderful, but I don't want to talk to you for this position. Have you installed software on a Mac? And have you installed software on a Mac without sitting in front of that Mac? That's how I was able to completely narrow down from dozens and dozens and dozens of candidates down to 1 candidate. It saved me a boatload of time. It helped everybody be more efficient at what they wanted to do. It helped everybody find the job that was a better fit for them. And it helped us to be more productive as well. So yes, have you installed software? Have you installed software on a Mac? Have you installed software on that Mac without sitting in front of it? Those are the 3 things that help me that I want to make sure and share with other people who might be doing hiring.
But then you might miss some people that would take 2 months to figure that out.
There's always the chance that there are technical things that you can learn quickly. There are people who may have lots of experience in that. In our particular role, our team is so tightly focused in doing what we do that to narrow down from 36 candidates, some of them who happened to be tow truck drivers, some of them who worked at a bank, down to people who were focused in our particular industry. This was how I knew I was going to get candidates that were uniquely qualified, that were definitely worth talking to, rather than people who would potentially be worth talking to. All right, last Q&A roundup. We'll see if we got some new stuff.
2 new questions.
All right. So when you say, can you change all root passwords, do you also refer to local admin passwords per machine? Outside of group policy pushes, how can those be changed?
So one of the things that I'm also investigating and hopefully soon will roll out is something called LAPS, Local Admin Password something. I forgot what S stands for.
We have enough alphabet soup in our industry.
yes.
It's okay to forget one. once in a
There's
while.
also a Mac equivalent that essentially allows you to store a local admin password, I believe, in the computer object in Active Directory, and it allows it to be changed and rotated on a set policy. Someone's probably more knowledgeable about this.
All right.
Oop.
Oh, okay. Catchbox. We got it.
I am very unfamiliar with it. I know a little bit because I don't do the Windows side, but I understand that there's a problem with that. It may have been fixed. The password's in GPO, which means you can access the password if you have access to GPO.
We have laps on 65,000 Windows endpoints. The password is not in the GPO.
Okay.
It updates really, really well, and it puts itself in Active Directory, which you can scope to specific user groups for who can view that object.
Great. Good to know.
Perfect.
All right. Try this again.
Have you? No. Just to ask real quick, have you also implemented Mac Labs?
Over.
No.
Okay.
Over.
Only because we don't Active Directory bind our Macs.
Oh, okay.
With the exception of, so most of our Macs are one-to-one. So I work for Cardinal Health. Most of our Macs are one-to-one. We do have some shared Macs that have functional accounts that would be like in a warehouse or another kind of an unusual setting. Those are domain bound.
Who do you work for?
Cardinal Health. So yeah, we do have some that are in some unusual situations. Those are domain bound, and so those we could.
But you don't right now.
No, we use Jamf.
Okay.
So I wrote some code that essentially puts a randomized password onto the machine, and then we don't know what it is, and then we can issue a Jamf policy to set it to some randomized password that'll push it up to the API, and then when you're done, it blanks out the API and resets the password to something we don't know.
Okay.
Nice.
All right. Somebody over here had a question?
You said you switched off of McAfee to what?
Sentinel-1. It's another next-gen antivirus similar to Cylance and what?
Can we get the catchbox up here?
CrowdStrike.
It's from Sophos to Cylance. Cylance is C-Y-L-A-N-C-E.
So back to you, just a quick question. That script you wrote for Jamf, have you published that anywhere?
No.
Okay.
No, and you won't.
Well,
Okay.
That's okay.
Legal says no.
Sometimes we aren't allowed to, even if we would love to.
Yeah, sorry guys, that one just legal said no.
We do have 2 minutes left. One of the things, this is what's been reported to me. This was not a decision that I personally made. One of the things that was reported to me is that it caught a higher percentage of the specific things that we deemed important, and also the method that Cylance uses to find bad things is not reliant upon on-access scanning or scanning every file periodically. It does it in a more heuristic way when things are launched and can block things. So we've noticed is it keeps the machines operating in a more performant way.
We've definitely seen an improvement with Sentinel-1, an improvement in battery life and things like that as well.
Cool. All right, Ryan writes, I volunteered at a Linux shop once as a sysadmin where we had to fire one of the other admins. It took 4 of us and about 3 hours of manually doing things. We adopted Puppet after that. Great. And that is the end of the Q&A. Any other Q&A? We have 48 seconds? No? Yes, we will make sure to share these slides. These are books that we like. They're both by Limoncelli, and you can get these from Amazon. The QR links will go. And here is the feedback link. I've been Dennis Wurster.
I've been Nate Felton.
And thank you for coming.